Okay, man, why don't you go ahead and get it started here?
All right, thanks, Jim. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Central Illinois March Lunch and Learn on Ethics. Before we get started, we want to review the antitrust statement with you. During this webinar, we intend to comply with federal, state, and international antitrust laws. These laws forbid agreements among competitors in the marketplace, which restrict a company's freedom to make independent decisions in matters affecting competition. Participants will not discuss nor field questions about any matters relating to individual company rates, underwriting, coverages, or marketing. We will not discuss present or future prices of products, present or future sales, terms and conditions, treatment of any customer, current or future business strategies or marketing plans, or refuse to deal with any customer, competitor, or supplier. Since we've got the legal statements out of the way, I would like to remind you of some upcoming Central Illinois events. We've got the Spring Symposium on the 18th and 20th from 10 to 2. That is a virtual event, which will feature experts from the industry and some really great presentations from students at Illinois State University. On April 22nd, we are going to have a social event. That'll be the Gamma Phi Circus. And then May 4th, we'll have an in-person meeting in Bloomington. Please check out our website or social media for more information about those upcoming events. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kate. She is facilitating the meeting today. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning. Thank you so much again for joining us today. I am Kate Loring, a member of the Central Illinois CPCU Society chapter and former chairperson of the National CPCU Society Ethics. If you're not aware, like Pam just mentioned, March is Ethics Awareness Month, so we've got a creative meeting planned for you today. We'll be doing a skit, unpaid afterwards, of course, but in front of a live studio audience, where we'll go through a fictitious ethical situation. While the actors will be taking you through a relatable scene, we also want you to engage. So we'll take breaks along the way and discuss what you're observing. Also in the chat, maybe not in the chat, I think before the meeting, you should have received a bingo card with various ethical issues and words or phrases that you'll hear throughout the skit. You can open the bingo card as a PDF, and then when you hear something in the skit that corresponds with a square on the card, use your highlighter function in PDF to mark the square off. And if you find them all, at the end, you'll uncover a special surprise on the card, so be sure to look closely. Lastly, before we get started, as you listen, if you have questions or comments that you'd like to share with the group, feel free to add those in the chat, and we'll get to them on one of the breaks. Now for our cast. All right, like I said, I am Kate, and I'll be facilitating the engagement part of the event. The fictitious meeting participants are Catherine, she's the Vice President of Finance. Jack, he's our project manager. Ben, right here in front of me, is the data analyst aligned to the effort, and he's newly hired in the organization. Anna is a customer experience specialist, and Laura is a manager in our claims division. Now let's get started.
You're traveling through another dimension, a dimension not only of mind and matter, but of virtues and values. A journey into a shadowland, into a state whose boundaries straddle the worlds of reason and emotion, money and morals. At the signpost up ahead, your next stop, the Ethics Twilight Zone.
Okay,
Let's get started with a quick CPO. Some of us know each other, but let's do a quick around the room and introduce ourselves. Catherine, why don't you go first?
Catherine, VP Finance.
I'm Jack. I'm the project manager, and I'm thrilled to be leading this project. It's been a great one to work on so far. Not a lot of challenges, so I'm really excited about how this is turning out. Ben, the new guy, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Ben and I am the data market analyst for this organization, and I'm the newbie here.
Anna, you there?
I'm here. Hi, Anna. I'm the customer experience specialist. And as you can see, I'm joining you from offsite today. So sorry I couldn't be there with you in person.
Well, I think we'd love to be where you're at right now, judging from what's behind you. And Laura, our claims manager, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Laura, and I've been working with the fraud unit, and so I'm really glad to discuss this today. Thank you.
All right. Well, we've been working on AI Plus's claim fraud model, RIG. The software has been effective in determining fraudulent homeowner claims. In fact, it was able to detect 95% of the fraudulent claims from a database of 100,000 prior claims. It correctly identified over 9,000 claims totaling over $4.5 million in fraudulent or overinflated claims. Some concerns were raised about the software because it had about 500 false positives, claims that we paid and were considered legitimately owed. So we're just discussing what, if anything, we need to recommend before we move this forward to full implementation across the company.
Yeah, I agree. The model provides indicators for our claims people to investigate, and that's great. But having indicators on 500 claims that are fraudulent, that our claims people now have to investigate, comes at a cost, both for additional claims expenses as well as customer satisfaction. Our claim reps may be personally at risk defending a software they can't even explain, and I'm concerned with that.
Well, I did an analysis of the false positives being flagged by the software and noticed almost all of them are from underserved markets. I'm the new person here, right? But is this okay? When I went through orientation, they told me we embrace diversity and inclusion. Now we have particular underserved market segments that are being falsely flagged consistently by the software. I know this company's modeling is proprietary and AI Plus that advises that the science behind the analysis is sound, but we cannot see the details of the rules that are causing this issue. Can someone please help me understand why we must move forward if we are seeing issues with this product that has adverse impacts that many of us may be uncomfortable with?
Sure, Ben, I can explain that to you. As Jack said, RIG detected that 9% of all claims are fraudulent. That translates to $50 million a year for our company. We owe it to ourselves to move quickly on any effort that can help us reduce the cost of fraud. Why on earth would we want to delay, or heaven forbid, stop this implementation from moving forward? I appreciate your concern for customers in underserved markets, but at the end of the day, we owe it to our company and to our policyholders to move forward so we can reduce the cost of fraud. With any AI solution, there's a risk of false positives. It's my understanding that the percentage we're seeing here with RIG is comparable to the percentage with other AI tools. And we've made business decisions to accept that risk for the greater good of the company. It's time for us to do that here too. We can always work through the bugs with RIG later.
Submitted for your consideration. Portrait of a typical committee meeting, a typical insurance company going through the perfunctory practice of signing off on a vendor service contract. However, today the destination for this committee is no longer certain, as its members have strayed off course, are headed directly into the Ethics Twilight Zone.
We have a contract with AI Plus, and we've been working on this integration for some time. How do we go forward with this?
Yes, I totally agree, Jack. There's never going to be a perfect fraud detection solution. Overall, RIG is financially sound. When we reduce fraud, it benefits all policyholders as it reduces rates across the board. Using RIG to detect fraud is like using credit scores in underwriting. By detecting fraudulent claims before we pay them, we provide the greatest good for the greatest number of people. A few may be adversely affected, but so many more are helped. We can alter our investigation process to rule out those few adverse actions that may result from the false positives. The good vastly outweighs the negative here. We have to look at the big picture for all our customers and keep this effort moving forward.
Yeah, we should move forward with the model. I'm sure the due diligence has been done by the vendor.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that I checked on the false positives and near all of them are from insurers from underrepresented groups. I think that's an issue, even if the overall percentage of people affected is not large. If all of them are from underrepresented groups in specific areas, isn't this just high-tech redlining? The model is supposedly objective, and I think a lot of these people have similar last names, and I'm concerned about the unintended consequences here.
RIG can't even detect ethnicities. We don't capture that information. This is not a D&I issue. The company is still achieving our D&I goals through other avenues anyway. So let's stop letting D&I stand in the way of fighting $50 million in fraud annually.
Okay, I was multitasking. Circling back a bit, we landed that we're moving forward with the software. I'm glad that's resolved.
Thanks for circling back to that question, Anna, but no, I don't believe we have resolved the concerns yet. Our adjusters will not be answering to all customers. They'll be answering to our adversely affected customers. And if they all have the same characteristics, regardless of their claim facts, that should be a red flag. Objectively, if these trends continue, I believe the model has class action potential, and those legal actions are not good for our overall policyholders or our reputation. I think you have to include that when you're balancing the good and bad. My people may be held personally liable in some states. Has legal reviewed the model results we're seeing?
Legal looked at all the variables used by the software, and they were okay with the variables in place.
Okay, yes, but did they see the results?
Yes, they saw the potential millions of dollars in annual fraud savings from the tests that we ran.
Do we have any legal people who know artificial intelligence? How was it framed for them? Are there experts in AI modeling or anyone who understands how RIG works?
Well, legal can raise concerns, but at the end of the day, they're providing legal guidance to help with a business decision. This is not legal's call. When we made a business decision to pay AI for the ability to use RIG, all of the appropriate parties had an opportunity to evaluate the risks affiliated with RIG before we ever signed the contracts. So that ship has sailed. Delaying implementation of RIG now is costing our company and our customers. We need to find a way to move this ship forward and course correct if needed. We cannot stop this effort.
I agree with you. There is a cost of delay for the model, but I think we have to take off any blinders and be objective here about the risks and the benefits of the model. Ben, what recent trends are we seeing with your continued testing of the model?
Well, we are continuing to see the trend of claims of underrepresented insurers being flagged by RIG as fraudulent. The data is objective and it is concerning.
Well, it looks like we're out of time for today. I thought this meeting would go a little differently, and clearly this was not enough time to come to a resolution. I'll set up more time on our calendars soon. For our next meeting, I'd just like to remind folks, we can fail forward and iterate over time. Thanks for your time today. There will be more to come on this.
All right, we're going to pause here and discuss what you've seen so far. Just a minute, we're going to do a couple of polls where you can interact right on the screen. But first, we're going to hear from you either by unmuting, talking out in the room, or adding your thoughts in the chat. So let's pause. Let's first hear what ethical issues you might have noticed during the meeting. Do you have any thoughts on that? Jumping out at you as something that could cause ethical concerns for this group.
Just the thought that the $50 million is more important than any specific groups that might be being underrepresented, and the fact that money seems to be taking complete control of the project.
Great observation. Yep, and somebody put in there about the claims of underrepresented insurance being flagged. Claim of actuarial fairness versus moral deservingness. I love that. How AI may be objective, but is it the right choice? Yep, money and corporate dynamics are influencing the group. We'll talk more about dynamics a little bit, but definitely something to consider with this makeup of this group. What else what might you be seeing? And good point, there is no guarantee that the AI is objective, that the people who developed said AI bake their biases into the algorithms. Yep, it can definitely be biased, even if it's unintentional. Okay, so what do you think about the concept of sacrificing a small number of underrepresented insureds for the greater good? You ever heard of do what's best for the greater good? Who's in our flag over there? Right behind you. Any thoughts? It sounds like the group has maybe several different viewpoints. One being Catherine's, where she's saying, let's do what's best for the greater good. What are some of the other participants offering up as their concern?
Don't know how many of the cases they're going through as valid claims, whether or not they're fraudulent or not. That was a problem.
Yeah, it sounds like they're finding in some of the testing that even though it's flagging these as fraudulent, we're getting these false positives, right? Because when they go back to the claim database that they use, they're finding that the claims, 500 of those claims actually were valid claims. And then what's happening when they look at the 500 people that were flagged?
I was saying that, I was saying, if the claim comes back as valid and not fraudulent, how many of those valid claims are coming out as actually fraudulent? Like how accurate is that? Does that make more sense?
I think so. So you're saying even the false positives, could they still in fact be fraud?
Yeah.
Good question.
It's catching 95%.
Okay.
So essentially what they did is they looked at their previous claims using this great tool and said of those claims, that claim sample, 95% of the ones that they had with an individual person that identified as fraud, this tool now showed it fraud as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, to your point, like if maybe some of those ones that we just didn't catch, right?
Yeah.
You didn't catch it either. Right. Okay. So essentially, maybe to bring it down to a simplistic viewpoint, what we're seeing is opposing ethical approaches to work, right? So on the one hand, we see what you call a utilitarian approach, which proposes to do whatever gives the greatest good for the greatest number of people. In this case, the argument being made by several participants is that the greatest good would be to eliminate fraud, okay? Because that ultimately impacts the costs that other policyholders are seeing. In contrast, you also are observing this, sometimes you hear it called the golden rule, or in a more proper term, it's called virtue ethics approach. And so it's like the old do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And something to consider with this approach are the questions of how would you feel if you or a member of your family was falsely targeted as presenting a fraudulent claim? And what if your claim was flagged as potentially fraudulent because of the neighborhood you lived in, or because of your last name? Is that unfair even if the majority of people benefit? So the two kind of opposing views. So somebody, Ben, mentioned one last thing I'd like to get your thoughts on, and it's about whether this tool and this model and the practice of using it could be considered high-tech redlining, even if it's not intentional. So let's use the chat or speak up here in the room on, do you think this could be considered high-tech redlining? Seeing any answers in the chat, but out there. This is a yes or no question. Do you think this is high tech? Could this be considered high tech red light?
I think people are free to answer that.
Okay. There's no right or wrong answer. Good, yeah. Emphasizing the good. maybe folks aren't familiar with the term too, so just in case you're not, redlining is the process of refusing insurance to someone because they live in an area deemed to be a poor financial risk. You can also see this in loan applications. Sometimes people are denied loans because of where they live and that being considered a poor financial risk. So it's interesting to think that perhaps while it's not intentional, the rig tool may be doing just that. So, all right, I think we're gonna go to some polling now. You should see here, the first one should pop up on your screen in just a minute. Have it now. And we'll work through this together. So what ethical approach is Catherine using? And as a reminder, Catherine is the Vice President of Finance. So is she demonstrating a utilitarian approach, which as you'll remember is greatest good for the greatest number? Is she using the justice approach, which is giving each participant their due? Or moral absolutism? Some things are just intrinsically right or wrong despite the circumstances. The way I like to explain that one is stealing ever okay? You know, you have people can make the argument that you know, their child was sick, but they didn't have money to afford the medication, so they go in and grab and steal the medication. Some people would say if you're moral absolutist, that regardless of the circumstances, that is ethically wrong. Others might argue that, well, it was for the life of my child, and therefore it makes it right. All right, it looks like most are suggesting that Catherine is using that utilitarian approach, where she's arguing that the greatest, by using the model, you'll be helping to give the greatest good for the greatest number. All right. So let's look at the next poll. And what do you think is the greatest ethical challenge facing this committee? Is it one, the financial pressure is too great not to act? Two, the program is threatening the mission and reputation of the company with its false positives. Three, there is too much pressure to move the project forward and not rock the boat. Or four, the differing power dynamics making independent judgment difficult. I don't see the poll.
People
Jim.
can't see.
Yeah, I didn't see question one.
1 second, we'll get that one popped up for you. There we go. Take a second here to answer one of those.
What do the students think? I don't want to weigh in on that.
I guess many of you don't have your computers here with you, so what do you all think? It's like we're split across the board here, which is not unusual, but when it comes to ethical consideration. So I'll reread it to you too, it's a little far away. So what do you think is the greatest ethical challenge facing this committee? One, the financial pressure is too great not to act. I guess A. B, the program is threatening the mission and reputation of the company with its false positives. C, there's too much pressure to move the project forward and not rock the boat. Or D, the differing power dynamics make independent judgment difficult. So you raise a hand for A. What about B? All right, C. And D. It looks like most people in our room here, and I'll say majority, although it's pretty well split there, say C is the biggest ethical challenge, which is there's too much pressure to move the project forward and not rock the boats. Anybody want to share either by coming off mute or in the room here why that one strikes you as the the greatest ethical challenge facing this group?
Hey, Kate, I'll hop in here really quick. I think that there's a balance in between C and D being ranked as first, just because you've got power dynamics in the room with your vice president. But you also have like a lot of pressure from a lot of different people wanting to move the project forward and not be the voice in the room that's going to rock the boat and say, hey, maybe this isn't the way we need to go, other than our new guy who is noticing that.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Great point. And we will talk a little bit more about each of the participants and what they're maybe bringing and possibly taking away from this interaction. Let's talk a little bit more about the power dynamics and maybe share if you've ever been in a situation where you are the new person and you're in a room with somebody that maybe could be seen as having higher importance within the organization. How does that make you feel about offering your opinions?
This is interesting.
Yeah, it seems like somebody, Logan, you put in there that seemed like they weren't listening to the new person who may not be as entrenched. Do you mind coming up mute and sharing a little bit more about what you see there?
Okay, there we go. It wasn't letting me come off mute. So yeah, it's interesting how the dynamic of a group that's worked on something for some time and also feels like there's sort of a homeostasis, like a status quo. If somebody comes in and challenges it or points out something, I just felt like the group was being kind of defensive of like almost not wanting to hear it because it messes up their status quo. And I think that can create an ethical dilemma because it's like the new Coke. I always go back to new Coke for those of you who are old enough to remember that. It's like, the company admitted that they should have thrown in the towel on that a lot earlier than they did, but they were so entrenched in it that they wouldn't even listen to outside consultants or anybody. So ultimately they listen to the customer, but and that's not necessarily an ethical, but there's just a good example of like being so entrenched in something that you just can't let it go. And so someone challenges it and you just don't want to hear it. So that was my observation, I guess.
Yeah, Logan, that's great. Like kind of just dismissing, and that could happen for a number of different reasons, right? You don't know the history of this group and how long they've been working on this project before Ben steps in and ruffles the feathers. But if it had been a significant amount of time, which for any of you that have worked in the industry before know that these things don't happen overnight, so they probably have been working on it for some time. And so their perspective of, you heard Jack there at the end say, oh, I thought this was going to go very differently. Probably because they've been working on it a long time and thought they had that clear sight of moving ahead. And then Ben comes along and offers a different opinion or a different thought to consider. And sometimes that could be a frustrating thing for those people to deal with. Not that they don't have to consider it, but it can be frustrating. And then it could offer ethical, as we're seeing here, it could offer ethical challenges as well when he points out something of an ethical nature. Okay. All right, well, great. Okay, now let's get back into the scene and we'll see how the characters handle this next meeting.
All right, coming back again to discuss moving forward with AI Plus's rig modeling for claim fraud investigations. And Catherine, I guess you had an opportunity to run some numbers.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. We ran some additional modeling since the last meeting. We initially thought rig would save us $50 million a year. After additional testing, we now believe that savings will be more in the range of 70 million a year. Based on this adjusted estimate, can we all just agree fundamentally that this is the best course of action overall for our company?
I totally agree, Catherine.
Thanks for all that additional information, Catherine. It's great news. However, we are still determining staffing impacts to investigate the flood claims that may eat into some of those savings. Additionally, my team did reach out to legal and they have some concerns about the rig trends too.
We all had an opportunity to review AI Plus and the rig model before we signed a contract, right? They've repeatedly shown us that the science behind the rig model is sound.
Well, we scrub our data before we send it to them. So they have not seen our test results with full details with similar names. And we still haven't addressed all the false positives in these underrepresented neighborhoods. Are we just saying whatever is best for the majority wins?
So AI plus doesn't even have the ability to see the trends that you see when actual customers' claims are run through the model?
No, they don't see where the false positives are coming from, but we can. And I'm not comfortable with just ignoring that.
Well, so here was another option they mentioned. They could reset the sensitivity of the model to reduce the number of false positives. But if we do that, we should expect the model to detect only about 90% of fraudulent claims. So we can either move forward with the model sensitivity set at 95%, knowing we'll get some false positives that might require additional investigation. Or we can lower the sensitivity to 90%, reduce false positives, and rely on our claims employees to detect that additional 10% of fraudulent claims.
The models resulted in multiple fraud flags, and our people will be working overtime to investigate each flag. We are putting in a request to increase staffing next year. I prefer that we have fewer false positives and then try and train the claims folks to detect more fraud in the system that the system doesn't catch.
That's fine. But since we've had 50 million a year in fraudulent claim payouts before bringing in RIG, I think we need to be realistic about how successful our claims employees can be at detecting fraud, especially given the high staffing turnover in claims and the knowledge gaps that result. It seems like technology is the best answer here. This is a simple business decision that has nothing to do with ethics.
Well, this sure seems like a sticky wicket. That's a pretty difficult conversation, don't you think? So let's think about how each actor's roles play into this and how it could be influencing their decisions. Okay, that's what we talked about earlier about the dynamics of the group here. So first we'll start with Catherine. She's the, again, Vice President of Finance. What do you think about how her role is influencing not only her decision, but that of the other participants? Are there any ethical implications with that? Yeah, you can come off mute or raise your hand.
So if there's something that's gonna save them now 70 million, that looks good on her part as VP of Finance, because that's like what she's in charge of for the group. So naturally, that's gonna have an impact on everybody else, including the project manager, because if you're coming in, or if your project is saving $70 million, that looks pretty good on both VP of Finance and project manager. So that's probably where that influence kind of comes from for their perspectives.
Yeah, so what you're looking at is she's thinking results, right? And if the results from a financial standpoint are very positive, why wouldn't she be the one, kind of supporting this and spearheading it to get implemented? Exactly. What else about Catherine's role is playing into this? Maybe think about the levels in the room, right? We've got a new analyst, we've got a manager, we've got a project manager, and then a vice president, and then a customer experience specialist.
Overarching seniority kind of gives like a wave of bias, so they don't really think, okay, yeah, this is probably the best course of action, even if it's just her saying something.
Yeah.
It should be.
I love that. Who invited the VP to a project meeting? Exactly. No, yeah, it is that wave of bias, right? It's if any of you have ever experienced a situation where you get told to do something because the executive wants this, right? And this one, the executive happens to be in the room saying what she wants. That could definitely, increase the level of bias in the room to do what the executive wants you to do. Oftentimes, to be honest, sometimes the executives say things just off the cuff and everybody takes that as gospel and runs and does something. And then the executive comes back and says, oh, I didn't really need that done. But this is one of the situations where Catherine, the vice president, is actually sitting in the room sharing what she wants done. Okay, yeah, Heather, good point. Because of your individual role within the project, there's a reason people are added to specific projects, right? For their particular knowledge and experience and the roles. Sometimes, depending on what that is for you, that could lead to either one, Catherine's case, her willingness to share her thoughts and opinions, and then others, depending on where they fall in that totem pole hierarchy, it could make for a more difficult difficult position to challenge. Okay. Let's think about Laura. So she's the manager in claim. What do you think is driving her thoughts and decisions? You hearing from Laura in the statements she's making? What are you hearing to be her biggest influencer? She's thinking about the decisions she wants to make.
Workers.
Employees.
Yeah.
Yep. And how long it's going to take them to.
You're getting more staff, we can see a certain point where. Can't, even if you hire more staff, it's not gonna be enough.
She's really concerned about if these false positives continue to flag, but they decrease the sensitivity, meaning you're not going to have other false positives to investigate, then her team is going to be overworked more, maybe more so than they already are. She's, yep, really good point. Staffing capacity, employees and their workloads, that's kind of the tunnel vision that she's having. And it's a valid, it happens to those of us that are in the work, and you have to take that perspective. Okay, let's think about Ben now, the new guy. First, what do you think he's thinking about at this point about joining this company? What about the power dynamic here? I thought he did a really nice job of pushing back, but that doesn't always happen when there's an executive in the room. So how might Ben be feeling at this stage?
I'd say he's probably pretty concerned because he just joined the team and he's come to find out that the things that he stands for and like the actual EDI stuff that is an actual issue is just kind of being overlooked for the sake of financial gain.
Yeah, I was reading an article earlier today about how people new to name the industry. We'll talk about insurance at this stage, but new to the insurance industry, as you're looking for jobs, for careers, it's not just about paying more, right? It's about what the company stands for, their purpose, their ESG initiatives, their D&I initiatives, those type of things. And so here is Ben joining. Here's Ben joining a company, and he maybe doesn't feel like they're standing up for the same things that he thought they stood up for when he joined the company. Good point, Logan. I do, like you said, I do think he is showing good leadership courage by speaking out to, we don't know Ben's age, but we'll make the assumption that he's not only new to the company, but maybe new to the industry, given the level of the role that he has. Julie, what do you think makes you feel like maybe people don't feel like he's listening, they're listening to him, that he's powerless?
It just seems like everything that he brings up, that the others just dismiss it and move on.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Talk about Anna for a minute. Anna's the one on the beach there. What have you noticed most about her? Anybody notice something about Anna?
She kind of just like go along with what they were saying. But I agree, just like profits.
Kind of thoughtless about,
So she kind of seems happy with that decision because it's going to save premium, which is going to make the customers happier because they're paying less money as a whole, aside from the underrepresented groups. So makes her job seem a little bit easier, I guess.
There's some really good comments in the chat, which is not paying attention. And it's harder for us here to be in the room, so if you're watching on the videos here, Anna's a bit checked out. She's just agreeing with the captain. She's on the beach somewhere, Facebook and taking selfies, not really paying attention, and just wants the decision done. So Valerie said she doesn't really seem focused on the meeting. Have any of you ever experienced that, where somebody's just along for the ride and just wants to agree with everything, but really maybe isn't intentional and paying attention with any of the interactions? What about poor Jack here? Project manager, he just wants to get his job done and get everybody moving in the right direction. So how do you think his perspective is influencing this group in this decision?
So Jack is totally shutting down that.
total lockdown, really just not taking it into the perspective of Ben and his data analytics skills, but more focused on securing his position in the future, being able to go back home and to his boss and be like, hey, we got it done, deal's done. So there's somewhat of a seniority aspect of that as well, not just, Catherine, but also, Jack, project manager, he has some real integrity and involvement into this project and wants it to succeed.
Yeah, it's his job, right? His job as a project manager is to get the project to done, right? And so to your point, like that's what's influencing him about pace. How do we get this done? How do we get to the end as quickly as possible? Let's see. Yep, he wants a win for his career. He wants to put that feather in his cap, put it on his resume that he implemented this great thing that saved us a ton of money. That's how do we get there as quickly as we can? Let's see. All really great points that you're pushing here. Okay. All right, Jim, ready to get to our last poll question? Should now be popping up on your screen. And this could be a tough one because like many ethical situations, there's not always one perfect answer. So what do you think is the best next step for the committee to move forward? So you've got a couple options there. The first one is to move forward with RIG as soon as possible and start saving on those fraud costs. Next option is to readjust the sensitivity to reduce the number of false positives, but also that potentially decreases the amount of savings you can see. Or 3, do you go back to the vendor, explain the concerns, and ask them to change the model? All right. Well, we're getting some answers there on the screen. Let's get around the room here. Like I said, it's on your computers. Let's raise your hand. Who thinks one is the next step for this group here? Catherine and Jack, yes, I'm not surprised. How about 2? Okay, what about 3? Overwhelming majority here in the room is 3. It's like we've got most on the online too are leaning towards 3. Somebody that chose, I can't see, but who did, but somebody maybe that chose the middle one, to adjust the model sensitivity down, knowing that that's going to reduce your amount of savings, but it also reduces the number of false positives. Anybody online jump in and share why you chose that one? Again, there's no right or wrong answer, so just like to hear that perspective. There are 11 of you out there, so let me pop up.
It's probably because you save money, because if you go back to the company, ask them to adjust the AI, that would cost the company more money. You adjust the sensitivity to, was it 90%? Then you can see how it affects the data and see if it isn't as biased.
Yeah.
And if it's significant, like reduced significantly, then you can move forward maybe with the revenue.
What you're talking about is reducing the risk, right? So in our business, you can't always eliminate all the risks that comes with, especially technologies like this one. But can you reduce it enough to make people feel more comfortable with the results that are coming out of it and potentially avoid a class action lawsuit for doing something like this? And maybe able to make changes to some of the concerns to rest. Yeah, good point, Angela. Angela, do you want to come off mute and share a little bit more about that? If you're one of the 11, or even if not, maybe just provide that maybe dissenting viewpoint.
No, I just thought they could just discuss with the vendor, and there might be some other options that could be put into the model to help, and that might appease the areas of concern on the sensitivity versus, stopping the project altogether. It might also help them be able to move forward.
Thank you.
I think, one of the things Laura had was litigation. I don't think you maybe caught that, but there's potential for legal actions, and that could, adversely affect the company. And this could be something that ends up costing them a lot of money, so by going back and doing all the due diligence, everything they can possibly do, it might reduce that, potential for later class actions.
Yeah, poor Jim's got, so Jim is totally in character right now, but he's dyed his hair black and he's got some smudges on his face. I'm not sure what I'm gonna look like. All right, so we got one last question. We talked about Anna earlier, but what about the ethics? We'll call her the Zoomer, or really like spaced out, multitasking Anna. Is she potentially making decisions without being properly informed or engaged in the discussion? Her role is as the customer experience specialist. She was put on the committee for a reason, and she's adding to the commentary about this decision. Is it unethical for her to be engaged, or her not to be engaged, if the reason she was not engaged was because she was doing other work? So there's two different things to think about here. So is it unethical for her to not be paying attention but yet being part of this decision? Is that unethical? Or could it be unethical?
I'd say, yeah, because her input could potentially have a big impact on what happens. So, yeah, I'd say it's pretty unethical.
Others, thoughts? What about you, multitasking? Do you still have that same viewpoint? With real stuff, like with real work, getting emails are important.
Yeah, if it's really important stuff, it's like integral to the business, maybe, but I think it's still a bit unethical, but not as unethical as the other scenario.
I love how you point that out, because ethics can be gray, right? It's not a black and white thing. There is a continuum of how unethical something can be, and from different viewpoints. Any other thoughts? Yes, she needs to advocate for how customers might be impacted by a false fraud claim. Nancy, you want to come up, you real quick, just add a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, I feel her job in this project is to watch out for the customers, because having a lot of false fraud claims are going to cause the company to lose customers overall. So she's there to make sure that we are providing the best possible experience for the customer, that we are taking care of them in a fair way and not causing them problems because of some model that may be incorrect.
Yeah, good, really great point. And Valerie, I see your point too here as well. Had she been part of that red line community, I wonder if she'd have a little more stake in the game and offer any differing opinions and potentially pay attention. Okay, so we're losing some folks here because of class, but we were going to stop right quick and see if you followed along in your bingo card. See if you, well, we're checking, you're showing it on the board here. If you haven't, if you've been following along and checked off some of your squares, in the chat window, tell me if you see any particular pattern of the boxes that you checked off. And I know you all can see it here in the room, so let the group online see if they see a pattern to the squares that they checked off. Okay. There you go, Spencer. It's an E for, what does he stand for? That is. Thank you. All right.
Well, you've encountered a journey into the gray abyss, moral and money, people and profits. A journey with a still uncertain destination for a country we call the Ethics Twilight Zone.
Right.
So we got, I want to announce.
Yep. Well, Jim's gonna hold up. Thank you all for evening us in that very amazing get there. I don't know that these folks have second careers as actors, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Appreciate you all coming. Hope you got belly full and have a great rest of your day. For those of you follow online.
Yes, we want to do all the actions. And then coming up, you got the student mixer on April 17th. This is we got 100 seating there. It's an industry and the chapter and the students. We'll send out signups for that.
And as Pam mentioned, 18th and 20th, we'll get the Zoom meetings for our mostly.
Thank
Good.
Enterprise compliance statutes.
I got. Thanks for that. Yours. All right, hold on.